Hi there, Leanne from the Vermilion District Chamber of Commerce here. Right now, I'm sitting down with John from the Liberal Party. As with all of our candidates, we have asked the same 10 questions in the same order to keep everything as fair as possible. So, John, I'm going to hand it over to you. You can kind of introduce yourself and let us know why you decided to run this time around.
Well, thank you very much, Leanne, and thank you for doing this. It's so important for the electorate to hear from the individual candidates so they can make an informed decision. That is the essence of our civic duty and the essence of democracy. As far as myself, I teach economics here at Lakeland College here in Lloydminster. And I have a wonderful, fantastic group of students. I'm so excited to be back in live classrooms with them this year. My political views have been shaped over the last almost 20 years since I started being a teacher, being an instructor, started studying economics. And then when I started teaching government business relations. And really started to see the value of democracy as it relates to our affluence, our economic development, our economic growth. It's all driven by democracy. Democracy itself is driven by another range of values that start with individual sovereignty and economic freedom. So we build up on this thing, this strong foundation, and we build democracy, and we combine the markets, and we have a flourishing economy. And that's what we get in Canada. It's why, with a small population and that is so spread out, we're still managing to match the GDP per capita, or approximately the GDP per capita of the US, which is an economic powerhouse. That speaks to the strength of our democracy and the freedoms it contains. So my role here is to serve democracy. Right? And if I am elected, I would be honored to serve you in the service of democracy. And what I mean by that is that when we have an election like this, it's a very, very important election, despite what some people are saying about it. They're disparaging the election as being unimportant or a vanity project. It is nothing of the sort. It is absolutely essential. I hope we get a question later where I can riff on that a little bit more. But the point is, right now, in this time and place, if there was nobody on the ballot here, if there was no Liberal on the ballot, what would the Liberals be able to do with their vote? How would they register that they support Justin Trudeau's and the Liberal Party of Canada's platform, that they believe in climate action, that they believe in economic growth through inclusion with an emphasis on sustainability? If I was not here with my name on the ballot, they wouldn't be able to register that they support this. And here's the important thing. Once we have individuals in the community that register, even though the Liberals may not win here in Lakeland, as a matter of fact, if I were a betting man, I would probably not bet on myself. But the point is that when enough people support a program, it draws the leaders of the winning party towards the values that are expressed in those votes. And that is the beauty of democracy. So that is why I'm here.
Excellent. Sounds good. So we will just get right into our questions here with question number 1. It says, Quebec has seen many benefits in threatening separation from Canada and has seen Confederation work in their favor, while Alberta has been on the losing end. What is your position on separating from the rest of Canada?
Well, the Roman generals knew that if you wanted to defeat Gaul, or if you wanted to defeat the Angles or the Saxons, or if you wanted to, whatever they were doing, the first thing they did was divided and then they conquered. Okay, a divided house will not stand. Okay, Canada needs Alberta. Okay, we are so strong in agriculture, in energy production, in innovation. We have an incredible generation of young people with so much talent and so much energy. It is my great pleasure to work with them, and to yes. We so we are a part of Canada. Now, what does Quebec have that we don't have? First of all, they have a population and they are very active politically. Notice that in one election, they elect the NDP. And another one, they elect the Conservatives. And another one, they elect the Liberals, right? The Liberals are not a foregone alternative there. And they have the Bloc there that, which always holds a part of them. As well. So you see, what they do is they elect from a diversity of parties and philosophies. They pick and choose off the shelf the policies and platforms that fit them. This is something that we don't do in Alberta. We do this proverbial thing where we paint a doorknob blue and everybody rallies up and says, I'm going to exercise my democratic right by voting for that blue doorknob, right? And so what do? We end up with a situation where when the Conservatives are elected, they take Alberta for granted. They don't send us back anything because they know you're in their hip pocket. They don't have to worry about you. They're complacent. They're not doing anything for Alberta, right? Now, here's the thing, right? If you were to send them a message, tell them you're not satisfied with that. Tell them that you are not satisfied with complacent, of being taken advantage of. You tell them that, you know what? We're going to vote with Canada this time. We're going to vote Liberal. See how that works out, right? What happens then, right? Now, totally included in the government, totally included in the decision-making process. A valued member, not in opposition, not obstructing, not with this antagonistic relationship back and forth, but a fully inclusive member of Canadian society. So where do the problems originate here? Yeah, solidarity, right? And uniformity, homogeneity. It's too much. We're just taken for granted. We hate Liberals. We're not going to vote for them. It doesn't matter what. And the NDP aren't going to win nationally, which leaves one party. They're taking advantage of Albertans. And it's about time you called them on it.
Number two, is your party going to get us out of the UN? The Paris Accord is going to slowly kill the energy sector in Alberta.
Climate change is going to slowly kill the energy sector in Alberta. Innovation is slowly going to kill the energy sector in Alberta. You know what else is going to kill the energy sector in Alberta? Something that is non-political and non-negotiable. It's increasing marginal costs, okay? What we're doing is, this is a decreasing productivity industry. What it means is when we started off, we were grabbing all the low-hanging fruit. All right, those are all the Alfred wells that you see out there, right? They were easy to exploit, easy to drill, easy to extract from, easy to abandon. Now they're gone, all right? Now we got to dig deeper, we got to look further, and we got to use new and expensive technologies and energy sources to extract the same amount of oil. Each year, it gets harder and harder and more expensive to extract that oil. All right, so that's an eventuality that we're going to have to face. Also, climate change itself, whether you like it or not, whether you like the Paris Accord or not, it's here to stay. The climate does not care whether you're a Liberal or a Conservative or a Green or whatever, or NDP for that matter. The climate is agnostic. It's coming after us. If this past summer didn't convince you, then you're not paying attention. Okay, what we're doing is unsustainable. Now, about killing the energy sector, really? Do we really think that's going to happen? No. All right. We have the best energy workers probably in the world, the most innovative technologies. We have researchers dedicated at the University of Alberta to finding newer and better ways to bring the dragon from the ground. All right, we can do this. All right, there's no reason why our energy industry has to suffer. Right, there are going to be regulations, but you know what regulations do? Regulations drive research, and research leads to innovation, and innovation leads to higher productivity. We offset, right, the higher marginal costs with higher productivity, and the industry, which was non-viable before, now is extended into the future. And how did we extend it? We gave it something to fight. We gave it regulations to fight against. We gave it adversity, and it adapted and changed. And that's what we're going to see in the oil patch. But we are going to have to adapt, and we are going to have to change. And no, right? The oil service workers are not going to be unemployed. The upgraders are not going to be unemployed. The refineries are not going to close down. Very, very little is going to change. And if it does change, it won't be for generations.
Pandemic debt and climate change costs demand a serious, bold plan to grow our economy. What is the plan?
The plan is to take serious action on climate change, is to not only meet, but to exceed prior goals. Now, I know what people are thinking. It goes back to the last question. If we do that, right, our economy will suffer. And what that means is our GDP will go down. Our GDP will go down. So we have to offset the drop in GDP. We know we can deal with the sector job losses themselves separately, but just looking at the GDP question, how do we promote economic growth when we're clamping down on a major part of our economy? Well, this is where the $10 daycare comes in, right? In economics, one of the things that I show my students is the graph of women's participation in the labor force since the 1950s, and we see the participation rate go up from about 25% to just under 70%. It goes up, and it kind of does this curve, and then goes down a little bit at the end. Just recently, it goes down. Now, during that period, what has Canada seen? A tripling of our affluence, a tripling of our productivity, a tripling in the increases in our quality of life. We have 3 times more stuff than we had before. And how did we get that? Because Canadian women joined the workforce, right? They brought their talents, their skills, their work ethic, and their adaptability against all odds, against all obstacles. They brought that to our economy and gave us this huge growth. And we moved from a production economy into a service economy, one of the highest productivities on the planet. So we're counting on Canadian women to save our economy. How are we doing that? $10 daycare. If a woman chooses, she should be able to go and choose a career of her choice. And this is so important and so fundamental. We get economic growth when we increase our population, increase our workforce, but we really nail economic growth when we improve the quality of our workforce. So when we take women out of the households, should they choose to work, and we make it easy for them to join the economy, we will get a boost from that I assure you, for anybody who's watching the Olympics and does not believe that Canadian women rock, right? We are going to get this huge boost in our economy from that. That's one source. We are pursuing inclusivity. What does inclusivity means? It means social equity, fairness, which means that we all have an equal chance to prosper in this fantastic country. And when we do that, when we say to individuals, look, you, all of you, can achieve your dreams, now we have incentivized personal development, goal setting, planning, and achievement, right? We actually unleash the potential for growth, productivity, and innovation from every Canadian, regardless of what social class, what community, where they come from, their place of origin, regardless of anything. That's what inclusiveness does. So, and this is what we want to do. We need to address climate change. Okay, that has to happen, but we cannot go back. And this is why, as far as the pandemic goes, what did the government do? The government sent billions and billions and then billions more out to who? Who'd they give it to? You and me. Well, I didn't get any, but they gave it out to Canadians. They did not give it, as many governments are so tempted to do, to give it to the corporations, and then a little bit will trickle down to the common people. No, the Liberals had the courage to give the money to the people, and that helped bolster the demand side of the economy. And right now, instead of being burdened with debt, households are holding savings ready to launch into our economic recovery. We are in the best position of the G20 right now, thanks to the vision of Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and the very valuable support of the opposition, the NDP and the Conservatives. And this is where we are now. We've invested that much so that we can retain the strength and the depth of our economy. Imagine if we had allowed the economy to collapse, allowed all those businesses to close, allowed people to stay at home with no resources, so all they could do was accumulate more debt. And now we try to trigger the economy where people can't get out of debt to buy stuff, and we have to start the businesses and manufacturing all over again. We'd be years and years getting out of this hole. We're already out of it. We need to move forward now, and we need to move forward together, right? This pandemic was quite a bit of a storm. You got to admit that. This summer was a bit of a climate squall, but this is nothing. We've seen nothing yet. The storms that are about to hit us are going to require that everybody in Canada mans their stations, gets on their oars, and starts pulling together in the same direction. We don't have a choice. This is what we want to do. This is why we're having the election right now, because no government can impose such a change on society without getting their permission. And this election is about asking you, right? The government is coming and asking you and saying, you know what? We work for you. It's not the other way around. And I'm coming to you, not as a vanity project. I'm coming to you in humility, because I want your permission. I have an idea. I have a plan to lead us forward, to bring us out of the pandemic, to deal with climate change, and to promote economic growth, all simultaneously. And that is the plan. And this is why we're having this election. It is non-trivial. It is very, very important.
Where does not only your party, but you personally stand on the issues of mandatory vaccination, vaccination passports, and the restriction to travel not only internationally, but also across our country?
So we can deal with it as a number of levels on that. Of course, the federal government does not have a say in how the provinces roll out their own policies. The government can support general trends, and we've seen that the Liberal government has come out with $10 billion to support COVID passports should the provinces choose to go that way, and a number of them have. So there is that from the federal level. The provincial levels are kind of all over the place, but what we're seeing is we're seeing a great deal of tension. We're seeing a great deal of pushback from it, quite frankly. And and that which brings us to where are we on it? Let's look at it from a constitutional level, the charter. Okay. Now, first of all, if we did have COVID mandates, they are not a violation of your charter rights. Okay, in no way. I mean, it hasn't been proven in court, but the way that it's written, it's not interpreted to be a violation of your charter rights. It's a public safety issue. Now, the other thing that we want to talk about here is who has the moral authority to make decisions? You know, in a small society, right, we're generally constrained by a moral code. You know, a guilt slash shame response. You know, where you're ostracized from your community if you violate the social norms. You know, and that works as a Dunbar number of 150. Beyond that, it doesn't work. In a larger society, we don't have those kinds of social constraints. So we build in, right, a social morality, right, a moral code for society. That's a social covenant, a contract, if you will. This is how we shall behave. And it's defined in a number of ways. One of the ways that we define it, well, let's go back just 1 second here, is that we have the right to our own bodies, our own decisions. We have that privacy. So nobody can come up and stick us with a needle if we don't want it. Okay, we have the right to our own physical integrity. And that is something that is not in dispute. That is not something that anybody is ever going to mess with. That comes all the way from the Magna Carta, right? Where we talk about individual sovereignty and economic freedoms. Later on, we get into property rights and we build our economy and ourselves, but that's where it comes from. Your individual sovereignty prohibits anybody from telling you what to do. However, let's talk about freedom now, right? You don't have the freedom to do whatever you want. The way philosophers, not necessarily the Liberal Party, but the way I believe it too, is you have the freedom to do what you ought to want. Not what you want, what you ought to want. And this means that there is a social covenant, an expectation that as a member of society, you would be concerned about young people who cannot get the vaccine. You would be concerned about older people or other people somewhere in the middle who are susceptible or vulnerable to the vaccine. And you would be sensitive to the needs and to the emotional impact and that our frontline workers are feeling as they are so discouraged and so pained right now to see this fourth wave, to see the ICUs filled up again. Why? Absolutely unnecessarily. Because, and who's in there? 90%, 92% unvaccinated. Meanwhile, we are postponing elective surgery. Oh, it's just elective, you say. Yeah, a hip replacement is elective. Do you know how painful a hip an arthritic hip is? You know, I know personally, not me, but my wife. It is catastrophic. And you are making these people wait a year, 2 years, and they get close to their operation, and then they say, oh, we can't take you in. You have to wait another year because these people won't get vaccinated. So it's a small inconvenience for you. You won't get to go to the show. You won't get to go see the Eskimos. You won't get to go on a plane. You may not get to go to college. Sorry, that's a slight inconvenience, but it's not as bad as an inconvenience as somebody having to wait another 6 months or a year for a hip transplant. I take this very personally. No. Get your shot and get it now.
What are your thoughts on a woman's right to access abortion? What limits do you think should be imposed, if any?
Again, we go back to the Magna Carta. All right. I mean, that's a convenient place to start. I just love the way that individual sovereignty rolls off the tongue. It just sounds so awesome, but that's what this is about. Look, you know, we all see these things on Texas right now. What do you got a bunch of big old boys sitting around a table? Well, they 70, 80 years old. Oh, we're gonna tell these young women what to do with their bodies. What young woman needs a 75-year-old conservative man telling her what to do with her body? Absolutely not. No, it is up to the woman to decide. She is the only one who can decide. It is not a social issue in this sense. It is entirely up to the woman. So I don't have a limit on it. All I can do is hope that people would be judicious and sensitive and make a responsible choice. Of course, nobody would ever want to hear of anything to do with third trimesters. Okay. And that, and the support for a women's right to choose does not extend to an endorsement of the act of abortion itself. I'm saddened by it as you are. I'm as sensitive to it as you are. But the primal aspect of the question is the individual right to sovereignty, and we cannot subjugate a woman's body to the decisions of anyone else, especially not a man.
Where do you stand on the proposed capital gains tax for the sale of your principal residence?
The capital gains tax has always been there for, as far as I know. I mean, it certainly kept me from flipping houses. My understanding of that is that it's a refinement of a statute that's already on the books. And we will not expect to see a capital gains tax on a genuine residence. If you buy your house for when we moved to Canada in 1964 to Milton, Ontario, my family had bought a house. I think it was $18,000. A house right now, if we had kept it all this time, I think that house would be worth, oh my gosh, well over $1 million, probably $1.5 million, right? You wouldn't want to pay capital gains on that. That is your principal rent. That is not what this tax is about. This tax is about somebody who buys a house in January and sells it in August, saying, I lived in the darn thing. It was my primary residence. And I sold it and I flipped it and I made a bunch of money on it. So no, that is the idea of the tax. Now, it is something not to discourage flipping, but to put a price on it so that there is a social benefit, the tax receipt, to offset the social cost of taking a house out of the housing stock and then replacing it with another house, the same house at a higher price level, and making it more unaffordable for young families. So now, that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, I'm an economist, okay? I'm an Adam Smith economist. One thing I believe when I slam the table in class, I'm 100% besides competitive private markets. There's two pillars that hold up society. One is competitive private markets. The other one is democracy. And the two of them hold each other up. They're self-reinforcing. Okay, so we need both of them. When we interfere with markets, we have to be extremely careful that we don't end up with perverse outcomes or unintended consequences. Generally, whenever we do interfere with markets, there are negative unintended consequences. I keep thinking about the foreign buyers tax. Imagine if you were in Vancouver and a foreign buyer wants to buy your house, I don't know what, for $2 million, and you're not allowed to because it's a foreign buyer. And so a Canadian can buy it, but Canadians aren't going to pay as much, so you're going to sell it for $1.5 million. That's like giving a $500,000 subsidy to somebody just for being Canadian. right? And why would you take from a homeowner to give to a home buyer? That kind of wealth transfer is really questionable. All right. So, as well-meaning as this is, I've got to say, as an economist, that I think we have to proceed very, very carefully on this issue. But as far as a tax on your principal residence, where this is your home and it is appreciated during your tenure, and you are legitimately living there, and you are not a a serial investor flipping these things back and forth and making quite a money, which, by the way, is not a crime, but it is income, and one should pay tax on it. Just an income tax.
If Bill C-10 passes with its present wording, it is promising to censor personal online content. Will you elaborate on the effects of an appointed agency having this power and the potential legal penalties they can enforce without a defense mechanism being provided to the accused content provider?
This is a question that we are going to have to deal with at a local level, a provincial, a national, international, and global level. When the internet came out, as you know, I don't need a history lesson right now, but when it came out, it was, we thought it was going to be this super highway of information. We were going to share ideas and get so much information. We're going to be energized with, it was going to help research, innovation. We're going to become wiser. We're going to have data at our fingertips. And what do we get? I'm sorry to say it, but the biggest money makers so far have been porn sites. Okay. And where's all this smut coming from? I'm going to call it smut because, quite frankly, my belief is that's what it is. But where there is a vast amount of money, there is there's a vast amount of vice. I'll just say vice for now. And because it's vice ridden, it is a vicious part of the internet. I'll just use vice and vicious as being extensions of each other. So they're there. Now, there are humans that are feeding that system, whether willingly or not. Our job is to be able to monitor that and ensure that those who are participating in that industry are not being coerced by threats or by their financial desperation. Okay, so that's one aspect of it. Other aspects of it, where you dox somebody or where you share inappropriate photos of somebody and you ruin their lives. You ruin their lives. Lives of young women have been changed forever by this, with absolutely tragic results. To let that go unaddressed is inconceivable, intolerable, and unacceptable. All right. So something has to be done, and we have to start somewhere. So we bring out an idea that we are going to try and police the impossible. All right. And this is nothing that we can carve in stone. This is a work in progress. And we know that as we try to constrain it, it's going to be like whack-a-mole, bang, we're going to constrain this is going to come up. It's going to seem like an exercise in futility. But we will learn. Society will learn. We know where the guardrails are, right? We understand that that our entire system of democracy, competitive private markets, and all that is fueled by freedom of expression. You are free to express yourself, but again, you're not free to do whatever you want. You're free to do what you ought to want. And it's this ought part. What ought you to want? Well, it's not for one person to decide. Society can't decide it because we don't have a deep culture going back generations going back millennia of culture of how to deal with inappropriate content on the internet. We've got 20 years, 25. We got 25 years of experience to deal with this. It's in our infancy, but we recognize already how important it is that we do something. So we are going to be prudent. We are going to respect freedom of expression. But what we want to do more than anything is we want to protect vulnerable people. And we're not going to argue the truth, because philosophy will take us back down that rabbit hole of what is truth. And, you know, and philosophers to this day, from Aristotle on down, have never really been able to define what truth is. Is it what we experience, or is it beyond that? Or is it just what we believe?
What TRC calls to action do you intend to implement in Lakeland, and how will you do it? So TRC is Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
The recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission are very, very broad and very inclusive. To really understand this, you know, we have to step back, and maybe we should look at the constitutionality of it. You know, the initial treaties and the initial contact, the starting point was the Royal Proclamation. I forget the date of it. It's quite a while ago. Anyway, the Royal Proclamation. Now, the Charter of Rights enshrines the Royal Proclamation in it. Okay, which means, right, that again, this is another thing that's non-negotiable. We have to address this. All right, we have to recognize it, and there is no room for you know, for the procrastination. And where's the procrastination coming from? The procrastination is coming from a lack of political will. And where does the lack of political will come from? It comes from a lack of unanimity in the people. That is, say, our society. And if I want to use the term settlers, I think that pretty much explains who I'm talking about. There's some recalcitrance there. We you know, there's a reluctance to do what has to be done. And governments really only have a mandate to do what their electorate wants them to do. And they can only do what they can afford. Now, Justin Trudeau was elected in 2015 to address these issues, and he's been criticized for failing to follow through on many of them. Now, not meaning to make excuses, but those last 6 years have been a heck of a deal, you know, with that fellow down south. You know, it created some really challenging conditions for the Canadian economy, severely limited economic growth, and really distracted from a lot of the key files of the government. And so we haven't seen a lot of action till now. But what we are seeing is, you know, with the recent discovery, well, not really discovery, because they were known about, but the revelation and the consideration of the unmarked graves and the implications of that. Again, let me backtrack for a sec. In 2003, 2004, I spent a year working in a small First Nations community, Atikamekw, Whitefish Lake, north of Slave Lake. I worked there for a year, lived on reserve for a year in a single room schoolhouse, pretty much, teaching a class of 18 young men petroleum employment training so they could get employment in the oil patch. A number of them were very, very successful and got their GEDs. Now, what did I learn during that year? I learned two things. Well, I learned a lot. You have no idea how beautiful that Aurora Borealis is until you get up there on a frosty night. But besides that, I learned about the amazing joie de vivre, the sense of humor of the First Nations people up there. But more importantly, I learned about their deep and profound love of family. Okay, it's unrestrained, it's limitless. It goes through time. And this is the part we have to realize, it goes back through time all the way to the early 20th century, to when those children were taken away and so many didn't make it back. And these families feel it even to today. Such is their profound love of family, and they are grieving. And we owe it to them out of respect to honor our commitments and to move forward on this. So again, this comes down to this election. We're going to do this. We're going to address climate change. We are going to address economic growth. We are going to address inclusiveness. That is part of the TRC. But we need Canada behind us. This is not a decision that any one person can make. This is not a dictator in Ottawa saying, I'm going to choose this path for Canada. This is just Trudeau coming to you and saying, yes, I work for you. In humility, I am coming to you to ask for your permission to take Canada on this direction, because our society is never going back. Our society is changed forever, and we have to take a new direction. And that direction includes the Truth and Reconciliation commitments, right? And the inclusion of First Nations as recognized nations, as outlined in the Charter, as ruled on by the Supreme Court. And we need your permission to do that without unanimity, right? Without a mandate from the people, this will not get done. So if you vote for Liberal here and now in Lakeland, whether or not I win, which admittedly is not very likely, but whether or not I win, you are expressing support for the idea that we have to move on. Notice what is happening with the other parties, especially the Conservatives under O'Toole. They are moving closer and closer and closer to the left. They are recognizing that this is a growing movement. This is a sentiment that Canadians feel right now. We need to honor our commitments to First Nations. And that means, yes, that means the impossible, the engineering impossibility of getting water up to remote First Nations, fresh drinking water, and removing the boiling water advisories. We need to loosen up cash. We need to innovate. We're Canadian. We can do this. We have the technology. I don't know. I kind of know why we're not there yet. They've been punting this ball down the road, or kicking this can down the road so long, but it's time for action. And we're ready to take action. But we need Canadians behind us. We all gotta, I go back to this analogy that we've come through a terrible storm, right? But the storm coming on us is not like anything we've seen before. This climate change that is fast upon us. We need every Canadian to step up. We need every Canadian to get on their oar and start rowing and start pulling together, because that's the only thing that's going to see us through this for the next 40 years. So let me just wrap up. If I don't, I feel I will have disrespected the First Nations issue if I don't circle back and mention that, so that based on all that, then the Liberal government, I'm asking you for your support to do what needs to be done, to honor our commitments, to somehow address the wrongs that we have committed for centuries. That's what we're asking for.
What are your thoughts on conversion therapy? Will you please share your opinion on how this will affect a person or parent wanting counseling to affirm biological identity? Do you believe the present wording denies the ability for a counselor to present a full spectrum of choices for a child dealing with gender dysphoria. Please address how this affects the professional and faith counseling positions as well.
Okay, so first of all, I don't know where to begin in this other than my life seems to be an endless celebration of diversity. Okay, here at Lakeland, in my own community, in the college community, we are seeing the liberation of individuals who are now free for the first time in human history, except for the First Nations traditional acceptance of the notion of twin-spirited individuals. We are finally free in society to choose for ourselves the direction and the sexual identity that is manifest in our hearts, right? It is written in our hearts, in whatever, it's not ink, obviously, but who we are and what we are, we know what it is. There is no conversion therapy to change who you are. All right. There is no shame associated with manifesting the real you. In fact, there is the opposite. There is celebration. There is rebirth. There is true love because you are finally loving yourself as your true individual. So I think that pretty much covers how I feel about conversion therapy. No, don't even want to hear about it. Second thing, what does that do for people? How does that affect parents that want to constrain the decisions? And I'm not even sure decisions is the right word because it makes it sound arbitrary. It makes it sound discretionary. It's non-discretionary. It is the way it is. We would be far better focusing our efforts on therapy for the parents so that they could learn to live with the truth and with the identity, and further consultation with them, perhaps in a group therapy model, to help them come to terms with any doubts or reservations that they have about that. Because frankly, it's on them, not on the children. As far as school boards, no, absolutely. The notion of coming out, whether it's a young man or woman coming out as gay, whether it's a young man or woman coming out as transsexual, whether it's a young man or woman coming out as transvestite. Okay, this is a very, very vulnerable time for them. I mean, I can trivialize it. I can say, you know what, I understand because it's like coming out as a liberal in Alberta, but that's a really shallow look at the amount of personal angst. I mean, I know my generation, we grew up in an era of homophobia. Unbelievable, unbelievable. People I know tortured through the lives, people I know now, my age, tortured through life, trying to live this double life, living a lie for how long, getting arrested if they went to hang out with their friends, being denied love, being denied the sanctity of marriage. Why? What was that all about? Right? So I've lost my train of thought. I'm just so aghast at the concept that was part of the generation I grew up with, and we have made it so far forward. There is no going back. These people had so much courage. My God, I just so many people. They're my heroes now, and I mock them. Shame on me. I mocked them when I was young. But they're my heroes now, as anybody should be who stood up for positive change. So yeah, admire them. They're heroes. They're going through change. It's sensitive for them. Let them do it in their own space, in their own time, and sharing their evolution to their true self with the people they are most comfortable with. And if it is not their parents, sometimes you can't blame them. If it's not their parents, then fine, keep the parents out of the loop. And other things about therapy and whatnot, no. Put the parents in therapy.
So the last question is COVID debt, climate change costs, the need to repair aging infrastructure. The costs are going up all around us. How do we pay for all of this? A serious, bold strategy to grow our economy is our only way forward, and local residents have the right to know where their candidates stand before Election Day.
You're absolutely right about this. It comes back to my first comments, thanking you for allowing us to share this information and our views and our platforms with you. So yes, this is the reason for the election itself. This is why we find ourselves here. I'm looking with 12 days to go before you're going to make your choice. And, as I mentioned before, Justin Trudeau is coming to you in humility to ask you for permission to pursue this new platform. This platform that builds on our past investment in society. That is to say, the CERB money that has gone out, the CUES money. Imagine if we hadn't done that, with the support of the NDP and the Conservatives, if we hadn't done that, households would be saddled with debt. As we emerge from COVID, instead of having money to spend and flush savings account, pent up, waiting to spend to drive demand in our economy, right? People would be burdened with debt. They wouldn't be able to buy, again, turbocharge our economy. And what would our economy look like if we had allowed all our small businesses to collapse, go into receivership, sell off, break up, right? All of a sudden, we got to start from scratch again. We wouldn't have jobs to go to. We would have to start looking for entrepreneurs who are willing to invest in a broken economy. We wouldn't get out of this. We wouldn't have economic growth. Now, go back to your first statement. You mentioned about prices going up. Okay, I built, it was quiet summer. I couldn't go anywhere. I built a couple of decks on the summer with pressure treated wood. Okay, it cost a fortune to build that. All right, now look at the price. I could build it for half the price now, or less, a third of the price. So what we're going through is a transitional. It's a transitional inflation. It is due to supply chain bottlenecks. We're hoping that they will be resolved in time. There are issues with containers, there are issues with transportation, there are issues with inputs like computer chips that are holding up our economy. They're going to be there for a little while. But we notice that even today, the Bank of Canada held the rate steady. Normally, in the face of inflation, if it was real inflation, they would have raised the interest rate to cut off expenditure and again decrease inflation. But inflation is not coming from the demand side; it's coming from the supply side, and it's a temporary, what we call stagflation. But we expect it to resolve itself right now, and this is why we're really pressing Canada. I, as an economist, Bank of Canada, as governors and economists, and the national leaders, certainly the Liberals are suggesting that we do not panic, we just stay the course on this. The left and the right are introducing the politics of fear, suggesting that this inflation is real and that it's going to be something that we deal with on an ongoing basis. No, we expect it to succumb shortly and to diminish. So let's not worry about the high prices right now. Where we are positioned right now is at the top of the G20. We are primed and ready to go post-COVID. What we need to do is wrap up COVID as quickly as we can. We cannot afford another spin-off variant like Delta or worse, right? We've got our vaccines, get them in your arms, right? Stop holding out. All right, this is not something we need to move forward as a society on this. All right, so and that's the idea. So the government has again sourced out the vaccines that we need. They made the money available for individuals and businesses. And again, we are leading the world in vaccinations, except for a few holdouts. You know who you are, and you can see that the ICUs are just full of them right now. The economy will not develop fully. You will not be back to work. I will be stuck wearing a mask in my classroom for the foreseeable future. Oops, I fell on the floor. For the foreseeable future, if we don't get COVID solved. And when we do, Canada's economy is going to launch like nothing else. All right. And what is going to make it launch so well, you ask? Okay, this goes back again to the questions we addressed earlier about, simultaneously addressing climate change through regulations and the corresponding innovations and increases in productivity that will engender, as well as freeing up one of the most productive halves of our working population, the women, through $10 daycare, and a host of other investments and questions. There are some other social issues in there, but we're basically going to be driving the economy forward in a sustainable and an inclusive way. And the amount of money that the government is going to spend in the next 10 years, something like $83 billion, in diminishing amount. It's all spelled out in the budget. It is all costed. All the fiscal programs, I think up to 2028 or something like that. And what we see is a decrease in our debt to GDP ratio. So yes, as your leader and my leader both say, right, GDP growth will take care of the debt. All right, we're not interested in the debt itself. We're interested in the debt to GDP ratio, because if we end up with another situation like this, we want to be able to dip into deficit spending once again. We don't need to balance our budget one year to the next. We balance according to the business cycle. Right now, right, we're in a recessionary phase of the cycle. This is when the government spends money to boost the economy. We stop spending it once we take off again. So we do have a plan moving forward. The amounts that we spend each year are in smaller increments. Even things like investing in education for long-term care homes and boosting the wages to $25 an hour, right? What are we doing? We're investing in human capital, right? We're freeing up people. Instead of worrying about their seniors, we're going to make sure that we have trained professionals and sufficient numbers to look after them, and to make sure that the mistakes that we all learned from this experience with the pandemic, to make sure those tragic mistakes are never, ever repeated again, in order to make the best out of a bad situation, you have to learn something from it. You have to admit that what you did was not perfect. You have to admit that you could have done something better. And I think at all levels of government, from municipal, provincial, we are in Alberta after all, and federal, there is room for improvement, and there are lessons to be learned.
So that brings us to the end of our 10 questions. So I just want to thank you for your time. And if there's anything else that you'd like to say in closing, now's the time for that.
I would. There's something I would like to say. When Jason Kenney announced on Friday that his policy had again failed, and he came back after a long absence and informed us that the bars had to close by 10 unless you were a rodeo, and that we would have all these other restrictions that didn't seem to apply to his base. Anyway, at that point, he made a really snide comment about Justin Trudeau. He said, go ask Justin Trudeau why we're having this election during COVID. And I would like to take Premier Kenney to task for that comment, because clearly he does not understand the basic foundations of democracy. I got into this election because I believe in democracy, and I believe that the government only has a mandate if it has permission from the people to pursue the path that it proposes. Now, this isn't just my idea. This is the foundation of democracy. When you change your path, when you pursue your own interests or your own ideology, Jason Kenney, right? You are not allowed to do that in a democracy, right? So when Justin Trudeau comes to Canadians asking for their permission for him to pursue action on climate change that is absolutely necessary to bring us out of COVID, that is absolutely essential to promote economic growth, which is absolutely critical. All these things have to be done simultaneously. And the world has changed forever. Canadian society has changed forever, and we have to pursue a new and difficult path, Jason Kenney, and you know that. And you pretended that you didn't because you had 30 years in government. So you know you cannot pursue policy without a mandate. And so now, because the pandemic was unpredicted and it changed the path of our society forever, that is why we need this election. Democracy demands it. Out of respect for democracy, Justin Trudeau is allowing the people to make that choice, to all grab an oar and row together towards a strong and prosperous future for Canada. And again, he can only get it if he has the mandate. All right. And so while we're on the topic of mandates, it would seem to me, and if I may just say something else, in response to Premier Kenney's snide comment, I would say that Premier Kenney has lost his mandate to govern Alberta. I'm sorry, but he has. He wagered all of his political capital on opening the Stampede. Well, that bet didn't pay off, so pay up right now, right? You are not fit to lead. So Jason Kenney, I'm going to say you, along with the other Canadians, all Canadians, get on your oar and start rowing and pull together and pull strong, because Canada's got to weather a storm that's coming up like we've never seen before. And we want to make it to the other side for our children and our grandchildren. Let us be good ancestors to all our descendants.
Well, thank you very much. Just want to thank you for your time again, John. And this has been a great time. So we will get this posted, and yeah, so thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Leanne. I really appreciate it, the opportunity and the questions. Thanks again. Yeah, you've got an important decision to make.